I had just set the water to boil. The kitchen smelled like garlic and thyme, that comforting aroma that usually made the house feel alive. It was just me that night. Mark was away on a business trip, or so I thought. I reached for my phone, half expecting some routine check-in, maybe a "miss you" or "I'll be late." But what I saw made my heart stop cold. One message, just one. No greeting, no explanation. "Pack your things and get out. I'm coming back with my new girlfriend. You're no longer needed in my life." For a second I stared at it, thinking maybe it was a mistake, a joke, some awful autocorrect error. But no, it was real. The words didn't stutter or soften. They hit like a slap with a frozen hand. I dropped the phone. My body just froze, not in panic, not in anger, just numb. Years of life together, erased in a single message, and not even a call to end it. I didn't scream. I didn't sob. I didn't even move for a while. It was like the floor had disappeared, but somehow I was still standing. My hands trembled, but not from sadness. There was something else, something deeper, a quiet awareness rising like smoke inside me. She didn't cry, not yet, but something inside her began to rearrange itself. I sat down on the kitchen floor, back against the fridge, trying to breathe through the weight in my chest. The clinking sound of the boiling pot behind me felt absurd, like the world had no idea what had just happened. I remember staring at the cabinets, thinking about how many dinners I'd made in that kitchen. For him. For us. For a life I thought we were still building. It was surreal, how quickly everything can turn to smoke. What stung wasn't just the betrayal, it was the ease of it. No phone call. No conversation. Just a digital execution of our marriage, like I was an app he'd deleted without blinking. After everything I gave, after standing by him when we had nothing, after holding my tongue through every storm, this was how it ended? A message so cold it could have frozen fire. I kept rereading it, as if more pain would bring clarity. It didn't. But even in that moment, that awful, disorienting moment, something inside me stayed eerily calm. I didn't call him. I didn't text back. I didn't scream or beg or ask why. There was a shift happening. Not the kind you see on the outside, but the kind that settles quietly inside your bones. Like the slow, deliberate tightening of a string. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was the beginning of something else entirely. I stood up slowly, my legs stiff like they didn't belong to me. The house was still, too still, like it was holding its breath along with me. I walked over to the window and pulled the curtain aside. Same street, same neighbors, same porch light flickering across the road. Nothing had changed out there, but everything had changed in here. In me. I wasn't just the woman left behind. I was the woman about to make choices I'd never imagined making. I thought about all the little things I used to forgive. The forgotten anniversaries, the missed calls, the growing distance I kept blaming on work stress. I had stitched excuses together like armor for him, and blindfolds for myself. But now, the blindfold was off. And underneath the hurt, underneath the betrayal, there was clarity. A slow-burning understanding that I was done being disposable. I didn't pack that night. I didn't make a plan. I just stood in my living room and let the silence stretch around me like a warning. Mark thought he had written the final line of our story. What he didn't know was, I was just getting started. And the next chapter? Well, it wouldn't be the one he expected. I woke up the next morning with no tears on my pillow, just a sharp, focused quiet inside me. There was no dramatic breakdown, no shattered plates or screaming into the void. I made coffee. Black. No sugar. I drank it standing up, staring at the framed photo of our wedding day on the counter. We looked so young, so stupidly hopeful. I didn't touch it. I just turned and walked away. Not out of pain, but purpose. Instead of reacting, I began calculating. I pulled out my laptop, opened folders I hadn't touched in years, tax documents, joint accounts, investment portfolios, his insurance policies. Years of his carelessness had left breadcrumbs, and I knew exactly where to look. I wasn't leaving empty-handed. He wanted me gone? Fine, but not before I took everything that legally belonged to me. maybe even a few things he forgot I knew about. Packing wasn't emotional, it was surgical. I took what mattered, not clothes, not jewelry. Information. Evidence. I copied passwords, photographed account ledgers, documented transactions I once ignored out of trust. My hands didn't shake. In fact, I felt steady for the first time in months. That's the thing about betrayal. Once the pain passes through, what's left is precision. And I had just started sharpening the knife. Before I closed the front door behind me, I paused. Not to cry, not to hesitate, but to remember. Every fight swept under the rug, every silence that lasted too long, every time I felt like a ghost in my own home. I let it all surface, not to hold on to it, but to burn it. Then I locked the door, not with fear, but with finality. I wasn't running, I was repositioning. My first stop wasn't a friend's house or a hotel, it was a lawyer's office. I walked in without an appointment, sat down with a calm face and a folder full of facts. The woman across the desk asked if I was ready to proceed. I nodded once. That's all it took. By the time I walked out, our joint accounts were frozen, my name was secure, and my options were no longer hypothetical. Mark had underestimated me. Again. Later that day, I made one more call. A private investigator, friendly voice, professional tone. I gave him Mark's full name, a recent photo, and asked for everything he could find about where my husband really was, and who he was with. I wasn't interested in drama. I wanted the truth, delivered quietly and thoroughly. If Mark had rewritten our story, I needed to know every last word he scribbled in the margins. That night, I checked into a quiet little inn just outside of town. Nothing fancy, just clean sheets, a locked door, and silence that belonged only to me. I sat on the edge of the bed with my phone in hand, watching the screen stay dark. No apology, no explanation, not even a follow-up to his cruel dismissal. That's when it hit me. He really thought I'd just disappear, like I was a phase he could file away with a text and forget. But what Mark never understood was that silence doesn't mean surrender. Sometimes silence is strategy, and mine was starting to unfold. While he played house with someone new, I was laying foundations, legal ones, financial ones, even emotional ones. I wasn't plotting revenge. I was reclaiming ground he never should have stood on without me. He believed I'd walk away with nothing. But he forgot one simple truth. I was the one who paid the bills, filed the paperwork, managed the calendar, and kept the ship afloat while he played captain. He built nothing alone. And I knew where every door in that house led, including the ones he thought were locked to me. And that would be his first mistake. The private investigator didn't take long. A few days later, I had everything. Flight details, hotel receipts, even photos. Mark hadn't gone on a business trip. He'd flown to another city, checked into a boutique hotel with a woman named Tessa, and had the nerve to use our joint credit card to fund their little getaway. She looked young, polished, the kind of woman who thinks charm is currency and truth is optional. I wasn't jealous. I was calculating. While they played house in a hotel suite, I returned to the real one, my house, still under my name, still filled with the echoes of my care. I didn't rage or rant. I cleaned, methodically, room by room, every surface wiped, every drawer emptied of my things. I left behind only the essentials, things he couldn't deny or destroy, documents, proof, and a little box that said more than any confrontation ever could. I canceled the utilities one by one. Electricity, water, internet, anything with my name attached was severed. If he wanted a fresh start, I'd give him one, stripped down to the bare walls of what used to be our life. The place looked immaculate when I finished, spotless, as if no one had ever lived there. Except for one thing, sitting right in the center of the dining table, a plain white box tied with a navy ribbon. A goodbye with sharp edges. Inside the box, I placed 3 things. First, a stack of wedding photos. Not the glossy posed ones, the real ones. Us dancing barefoot in the living room, laughing over burned pancakes. Him holding my hand during my father's funeral. Moments he probably thought I'd forgotten. Second, copies of our financial records. Annotated, highlighted, organized. Every account, every investment, every lie he told about being broke. And third, a handwritten note, just one sentence. "You're right, I'm no longer needed, but neither is your access to everything we built." No signature, no threats, just the truth. It sat there like a weight, heavier than anything I could have screamed in his face. Because the beauty of silence is that it forces the other person to sit with themselves, to read, to wonder, to sweat. And if there's one thing I learned about Mark, it's that he hated being forced to reflect, especially when the mirror was clean. I locked the door behind me one last time. It didn't feel like a goodbye. It felt like closing a chapter I'd already reread too many times. I walked away without turning back, keys in my pocket, spine straight. Let him return to a house stripped of comfort, stripped of convenience, stripped of the woman who once made it feel like home. I didn't owe him noise. I owed myself peace. I imagined the moment he'd walk through the door, smug, maybe even laughing with Tessa on his arm, expecting warmth, welcome, and maybe the faint smell of dinner. Instead, he'd find silence. A house colder than the message he sent me. No power, no water, no trace of the life he casually tossed aside. Just that box. That message, that gaping emptiness where his comfort used to live. Tessa wouldn't understand. She'd probably ask questions, flip light switches, complain about the Wi-Fi. Maybe she'd even ask if he was sure this was his house. And in that moment, Mark would realize something chilling. He hadn't just replaced me. He'd underestimated me. He forgot I was the one who built the walls he now stumbled through, clueless and unprepared. I didn't need to be there to watch it unravel. I already knew how the scene would play out. The confusion, the rising panic, the slow realization that the woman he dismissed with a text had left him a lesson wrapped in stillness. And as I drove away that night, windows down, wind in my hair, I felt something unfamiliar. Not revenge, not victory, just freedom. Quiet and complete. He came back expecting chaos, maybe tears, maybe begging, or worse, forgiveness. But when Mark and Tessa pulled into the driveway, what they found was something much colder. The front porch light was off, the windows were dark, the key he once carried like a badge of control no longer fit in the lock. He jiggled it for a while, confused, then annoyed, then silent. That silence would become very familiar to him in the days ahead. Inside, there was no dinner waiting, no music, no scent of home, just the echo of their footsteps and the weight of absence. I had left the place not just empty, I'd made it hollow. He wandered through, opening cabinets I had cleared, checking drawers that held only echoes, and when he reached the dining table, I imagine he paused. The box was gone, but its message? Still lingering in every stripped-down corner. His phone buzzed later that evening. My name lit up on the screen, but it wasn't a message from me. It was a legal notice. Divorce proceedings filed, asset separation underway, and a quiet reminder that the house, the one he walked back into so casually, was legally mine to sell. A real estate sign would go up in the yard the next morning. He'd traded a wife for a fantasy, and I'd traded silence for a future. I never picked up his calls, not once. He tried, of course, at first with confusion, then frustration, and finally desperation. Each voicemail sounded more unhinged than the last. "We need to talk. This is still my house. You're being unreasonable." But what he couldn't understand was that he no longer had a seat at the table. Not legally, not emotionally, not anywhere in my life that mattered. I wasn't hiding. I was living, just not on his terms. I had found a quiet place to stay while everything processed. I answered the lawyer's calls. I signed the paperwork. I checked in with the real estate agent. Everything moved forward, steady and precise. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting to Mark. I was building without him. Each step was a reclaiming of my space, my time, my self-respect. And while he tried to make sense of a house that no longer responded to him, I was already mapping out the next chapter. Tessa, I heard, didn't handle the reality well. It's easy to enjoy the spoils when someone else built the palace. But when the lights go off, the locks change, and the comfort vanishes, that's when you see who's really willing to stay. Spoiler, she wasn't. He tried to regain control, of course. Claimed I was being spiteful, said we could work things out, as if trust was something you could glue back together with empty apologies. But I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was just done. And that, I think, unsettled him more than anything else. There's power in not needing revenge, only resolution. I didn't raise my voice. I raised the bar. The house went on the market within a week. My name was the only one on the documents. I made sure of that. He showed up once during a showing, probably hoping to intimidate me. I didn't even flinch. I just looked him in the eye, smiled, and handed him a copy of the paperwork. Notarized, final, bulletproof. He mumbled something about fairness. I wished him luck finding it. He replaced me with someone new. I replaced him with a future. One where my name meant something again. One where silence wasn't punishment. It was peace. And the woman he thought would disappear? She wasn't just surviving. She was rising, quietly, fully, and without looking back. I didn't rush into my new life. I built it piece by piece, like stitching a quilt out of scraps I'd once overlooked. I used part of the settlement money to start a small consulting business. Nothing flashy, just something that let me breathe on my own terms. The clients came slowly, then steadily. Word spread. Apparently, a woman who keeps her cool while losing everything is someone people trust, especially other women. Especially women like me. I moved into a modest home far from the chaos. It wasn't grand, but it was mine. Every doorknob, every lamp, every carefully chosen color on the walls. There were no ghosts here, just possibility. I started going to local events again, joined a book club, planted herbs by the window. Little things, healing things. My world didn't explode after Mark left. It expanded. Quietly, beautifully, without him in it. Then one day, months later, I got a message. Not a cruel one this time. Just pitiful. It was Mark. Said Tessa was gone, that money was tight, that he missed what we had. I stared at it, that blinking gray bubble, and smiled without warmth. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. I was just amused that after everything, he still believed I might be waiting. He asked if I'd meet him for coffee, just to talk. The old me might have hesitated, might have wondered if closure was something I still needed. But I wasn't her anymore. Still, I agreed, not out of curiosity, not out of softness, but because some endings deserve to be witnessed in person. We met at a small cafe downtown, the kind of place we used to walk past without noticing. He looked smaller, not physically, but in spirit, deflated, lost. He talked first, about regrets, about how things spiraled, about how Tessa didn't understand him the way I did. I sipped my coffee and let him ramble. I didn't nod, I didn't argue, I just listened, calm and unbothered. He was trying to rewrite our story again, only this time with himself as the victim. I recognized the pattern. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was asking for relevance. Then came the question. That one, inevitable question. Do you ever think about me? Do you ever miss what we had? He asked it with that familiar tilt in his voice, like he already expected a yes. And for a moment, I just looked at him, the man who once thought he could erase me with a single text. The man who believed I was no longer needed. I set my cup down gently, folded my hands, and smiled. Not cruelly, just clearly. No, I said, but thank you for reminding me what I never needed. His face twitched, a flicker of disbelief, like someone who's just realized the door they slammed shut now only opens from the other side. There was no drama in my voice, no satisfaction either, just truth, simple, finished, and final. He didn't say much after that. I think he understood. Or maybe not. Maybe he never would. That was no longer my concern. I stood, wished him well, and meant it, strangely, then walked out into the early evening air. The world felt lighter than it had in years. The past no longer clung to my shoulders. It just drifted. He tried to discard me like a chapter he didn't want to read anymore. But I didn't need to rewrite him. I simply closed the book and started a new one. One where I was no longer the wife, no longer the background, no longer needed, because I was never meant to be someone's necessity. I was meant to be my own beginning.